Prince Harry believed the palace had already taken everything it could take from him. His military appointments were gone, his working role had vanished, and the distance between California and the crown had hardened into something almost permanent. But behind the closed doors of Buckingham Palace, King Charles made one final decision. With a single signature, the monarch revoked Harry's remaining official royal titles forever, and the news left his youngest son stunned into silence. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Harry had spent years insisting freedom mattered more than rank, yet a final thread still tied him to the institution he had left. Those titles carried no daily power, but they proved the palace still recognized him within its official structure. Losing them would not merely change paper. It would erase the last formal place he could call his own. Charles knew everyone in his private study understood what was coming. Two senior constitutional advisors stood across from him as a sealed folder was placed on the desk. A constitutional advisor guides the monarch on legal duties and authority. Inside rested a declaration ordering Harry's designations removed from palace records, ceremonial lists, and future state documents. The king opened the file slowly. Camilla watched as he removed his glasses and stared at his son's name. For seconds, he did nothing. The queen consort finally asked whether he was certain. Charles lowered his hand and answered without comfort. Certainty was no longer the issue. Duty was. Then the pen touched the page. The declaration revoked Prince Harry's final official royal titles forever. A royal declaration is a formal written command issued under the monarch's authority. This one contained no review date, temporary suspension, or path to restoration during Charles's reign. It would govern future ceremonies, court circular entries, the official record of royal engagements, and succession-era documents prepared for the monarchy's next chapter. Later, Harry answered a private call from a palace secretary in California. The official read the signed decision without room for misunderstanding. He rose from his chair, crossed the room, and asked one word twice. Forever? The answer did not change. Harry first believed the punishment came from years of public conflict. Then the secretary read a sentence referring to a recent breach of royal confidence. The phrase meant private information shared within the family had been exposed. Suddenly, the decision carried a darker meaning. Harry had lost the titles, but before he could understand why, he had to confront what they meant to him, his father, and the brother who would inherit everything he had left behind. This was not merely a constitutional correction written in cold palace language. It was a collision between a father who wore the crown, a younger son who still carried old wounds, and an elder brother preparing to protect the monarchy at any cost. Charles saw an institution at risk. William saw a boundary that had been crossed. Harry saw rejection. Beneath the titles, statements, and protocol stood three men who could no longer separate family pain from royal duty. Harry had spent years saying he wanted freedom, yet the titles still carried something he could not easily dismiss. They represented his birth, his history, and the place he once held beside his family. A constitutional correction is an official change made to protect the legal and ceremonial order of the monarchy. To the palace, the decision created clarity. To him, it felt like proof that the family identity he had resisted still mattered more than he wanted to admit. Meghan found him sitting alone with his phone face down on the table. She asked what had happened, but he did not answer immediately. His hands remained tightly clenched as he stared ahead. When Harry finally spoke, his voice was calm, almost empty. He told her that the titles were gone forever. Then he revealed the detail that wounded him most. William had been consulted before the announcement. Harry felt replaced in that instant. His brother had been allowed inside the room where his future was discussed, while he had received the verdict through a palace secretary. Meghan told him the decision had clearly been prepared long before the call. He agreed, but his anger was no longer aimed only at Charles. It had shifted toward the brother, who would inherit the crown, the palace, and every place Harry had lost. Charles carried a different pain. As king, he had to defend the crown's credibility because royal authority depends on trust, discipline, and controlled access. As a father, he remembered the boy who had once depended on him and the son who had walked through grief under the eyes of the world. Duty demanded distance. Memory made that distance unbearable. William entered his father's study after the declaration had been signed. He noticed the document on the desk, but refused to touch it. Charles asked whether the punishment had gone too far. The prince chose his words carefully and said, avoiding the decision would have been more dangerous than making it. Yet William had not demanded the removal. A documented palace briefing showed that Charles had initiated the action after receiving evidence that the family's internal protections had failed. The future king had only confirmed that the danger could no longer be ignored. Then, a palace aide opened a secure cabinet and removed a second folder. Inside was a transcript from a recent private ceremony, containing a conversation that should never have left the room. The decision had exposed every fracture between father and sons, but the true point of no return was hidden inside that forbidden exchange. For months, the palace had tolerated criticism, interviews, memoirs, and accusations. Charles absorbed humiliation because he still believed silence might preserve a path back for Harry. Then came one private incident the public never saw. It happened during a restricted memorial planning meeting at Clarence House, where family trust was supposed to remain absolute. By the time the gathering ended, a confidential promise had been broken, and Charles knew his son's remaining royal status had become impossible to defend. Charles had quietly kept one narrow channel open to his younger son. Through it, Harry could receive sensitive family updates before they reached television screens or newspaper front pages. The arrangement was informal, but the rules were strict because private royal access depends on trust. For the king, that channel was not just practical. It was his last attempt to behave like a father before the institution forced him to act only as a monarch. Harry joined the memorial discussion remotely. The meeting concerned a future ceremony connected to Princess Diana, and a memorial ceremony is an official event created to honor someone after death. Only Charles, William, Harry, and one trusted private secretary took part. The guest list, personal remarks, and family decisions were still unfinished, which made secrecy essential. Charles spoke plainly before the discussion ended. He told both sons that nothing from the meeting could leave the room. William agreed immediately. Harry gave the same promise. The private secretary recorded that warning in the official meeting account, a written record used to preserve exactly what was said and decided. 48 hours later, the promise collapsed. Charles received a media briefing during breakfast and recognized one sentence at once. It was his own private wording, spoken only during the memorial meeting. He folded the page, placed it beside his untouched tea, and said nothing. Camilla watched his expression change. The queen consort had seen him endure public attacks before, but this was different. This time, someone had carried his private grief beyond the family walls. The king called Harry directly. No aides listened. Charles asked whether the information had come from him. Harry denied authorizing any release, and insisted he had not sent the wording to the press. Yet when his father asked who else had heard his account, he refused to give a name. Harry's denial left the source uncertain, but the recorded warning made the breach impossible to dismiss. Someone inside his circle had received protected information, and he could not or would not control what happened next. William read the leaked phrases and gave Charles a cold choice. Confidential access and official royal recognition could no longer survive together. The future king said one had to end before the other caused greater damage. Charles remained silent. Then he ordered Harry to return to Britain. The leaked conversation had created the crisis, but the crown would not deliver its final punishment from a distance. Harry would have to stand before his father and hear the truth directly. Harry arrived believing there was still room to negotiate. He expected anger, perhaps another warning, but not the complete destruction of his remaining royal identity. Inside a private room at Clarence House, no cameras waited, no courtiers stood between them, and no public statement could soften the exchange. Charles sat across from his son with the declaration already prepared. What followed was not a meeting between monarch and duke. It was a father telling his child that trust had finally run out. Harry entered Britain without a public schedule and was driven directly to Clarence House through a private entrance. Clarence House is the royal residence used by the king for both personal and official meetings. His arrival was kept away from the main palace route, because Charles wanted the decision delivered before rumors could shape it. Charles ordered the room cleared. Even the private secretary left after placing the declaration on the table. For the first time in years, father and son faced each other without advisors, spouses, or public relations teams. The silence between them felt heavier than any formal statement. The king slid the folder forward, but did not open it. He told Harry that the remaining titles were being revoked permanently because official royal recognition required trust, and the palace no longer possessed enough of it. A royal declaration is a formal command issued under the monarch's authority, and this one would remove the final designations from every future ceremonial record. Harry pushed the folder back. He accused Charles of choosing William's future over his younger son. He said he had not authorized the leak, and demanded to know why he was being punished for another person's actions. His voice rose, then broke. The anger was real, but beneath it sat something deeper, the fear that his father had finally stopped fighting for him. Charles answered slowly. The issue, he said, was not only who leaked the words, it was Harry's refusal to control what happened after private information reached his circle. The monarch admitted he had kept making exceptions because he feared losing his son completely. Harry stared at him. Then Charles revealed the part no one outside the palace knew. Senior advisors had recommended removing the titles months earlier. The king had rejected the proposal twice. He had delayed, defended Harry, and insisted reconciliation was still possible. The memorial breach destroyed that final hope. Harry's anger hardened again. He asked whether William had supported the decision. Charles refused to answer at first, but his silence gave enough away. Harry stood and demanded to see his brother. He said the future king should repeat every judgment to his face, rather than speak behind palace doors. Charles warned that the meeting could make everything worse. Harry did not move. The conversation between father and son had shattered the last illusion of trust, but his fury had now turned toward the man he believed helped close the palace gates forever. Harry saw William as the unseen force behind the decision, a future king protecting his inheritance by removing a troublesome brother. But the truth was more complicated. William had not written the declaration, nor had he asked Charles to erase Harry's titles. His influence came through something colder and more powerful. He refused to guarantee Harry's place in the monarchy he would one day lead. That refusal gave Charles the answer the king had spent months trying to avoid. William's position carried unusual weight, because every compromise made under Charles would eventually become part of his reign. The direct heir is the person first in line to inherit the throne, and his judgment shapes how the monarchy prepares for the future. If Harry kept symbolic royal authority now, the future king would one day have to decide whether to preserve it, limit it, or remove it himself. Charles raised that question during a private succession briefing. A succession briefing is a formal discussion about how power, duties, and royal roles will pass to the next monarch. The king asked whether William would restore Harry's ceremonial recognition after the crown changed hands. The prince studied the papers, then said he could not promise what the institution might no longer be able to support. William remained alone after the meeting ended. He lifted an old photograph of himself and Harry from a shelf and stared at it longer than he intended. The memory weakened his resolve. He turned the frame face down, not because he hated his brother, but because affection made the decision harder to defend. Catherine confronted that conflict later in private. She asked whether protecting the monarchy truly required emotional finality. William admitted he did not want Harry erased from the family. Yet he feared that every exception created another path for private pain to become public. Brotherhood could not become permanent leverage against the crown. The prince had offered one final alternative. Through a documented palace proposal, Harry could retain the remaining titles by signing a binding confidentiality framework. The framework was a legal agreement controlling how future palace information could be used or shared. William believed it would preserve a narrow connection while protecting family conversations. Harry rejected it. During a recorded call with palace counsel, he called the condition an attempt to silence him. He argued that trust could not be rebuilt through restrictions. William heard the response and understood the choice had been made. Charles then authorized the permanent order. Across the palace, staff members received quiet instructions to remove Harry's titles from ceremonial lists, formal templates, and future state planning records before the public announcement. William's refusal did not create the decision, but it removed the last protection standing between Harry and the full machinery of the crown, and that machinery began moving immediately. Royal punishment rarely arrives with shouting. It arrives through revised lists, altered invitations, closed offices, and names quietly removed from places where they once seemed permanent. While Harry remained inside Clarence House, the palace had already begun carrying out Charles's command. Ceremonial records were changed. Future roles were reassigned. Old privileges disappeared line by line. For the institution, it was administrative work. For Harry, each alteration was proof that his royal life was being dismantled in real time. The Lord Chamberlain's office sent a confidential directive across the royal household. The office manages official ceremonies, formal appointments, and the practical running of royal events. Every department received the same order: remove Harry's revoked designations from active records, correspondence templates, and future state planning documents, before the decision became public. Staff members worked without debate. Patronage references, still linked to Harry's former role, were reassigned to working royals. A patronage is a formal connection between a royal figure and a charity or public organization. Ceremonial associations were also transferred, ensuring that no symbolic duty remained attached to his name and no empty position could later become a path back. One longtime clerk entered the records room carrying a small tool. He stopped before a cabinet marked with Harry's former official titles, unscrewed the brass nameplate, and held it in his hand. The clerk had processed royal changes for decades, yet he paused before placing the plate inside an archive box marked inactive. The action took seconds. Its meaning would last forever. Harry saw the result before leaving Britain. A palace official handed him the revised entry, showing only his personal name and his place within the king's family. His former designations had vanished. He read the page twice, then lowered it and said it looked as though someone had edited his life. Meghan called privately soon afterward. She urged him to challenge the declaration in public, and warned that silence might allow the palace to define him permanently. Harry refused. He told her another public war would prove Charles's argument and make the removal appear necessary. She pressed him again, but he said anger would not return what had already been taken. Charles had drawn one careful distinction. The king did not remove Harry from the line of succession, the legal order determining who may inherit the throne, and he did not deny their blood relationship. He separated his son from official royal service without pretending the family bond no longer existed. Then Harry surprised everyone. Instead of releasing an angry statement, he requested one final private meeting with William. The palace expected resistance, perhaps even retaliation. What came instead was a quieter decision. The institution had erased Harry's formal identity. Yet beneath the humiliation, Something had shifted. Two brothers would now have to meet without titles, standing between them. For years, every exchange between Harry and William had carried the weight of rank, resentment, public accusation, and competing versions of the past. But when they finally met after Charles' declaration, neither arrived with an advisor. There were no prepared statements, and no palace officials waiting outside the door. One brother would inherit the crown. The other had just lost his final official connection to it. For a brief moment, they spoke not as princes, but as the sons of the same wounded family. William agreed to the meeting only after both men accepted one condition: nothing would be recorded, summarized, or passed through palace staff. The private sitting room was chosen because it stood away from the main royal offices, where every movement could become part of official business. Confidential meant more than secret here. It meant the words would belong only to them. Harry arrived carrying years of anger. His departure, the interviews, the accusations, and every private wound, turned public, had damaged more than trust. They had changed how William heard even the simplest sentence from his brother. The future king feared that any conversation could later become evidence in another battle. Harry feared that silence would always be used against him. William dismissed the security officer and closed the door himself. Harry remained standing until his brother motioned toward a chair. Neither spoke at first. The quiet felt unfamiliar because privacy between them had become almost impossible. Then Harry asked the question beneath all the others. "Did you want me gone completely?" William did not answer at once. The prince had expected anger over the titles, demands for an appeal, perhaps another accusation about control. Instead, he heard fear. Harry was not asking about ceremony. He was asking whether his brother still saw him as family. William answered directly. He said he wanted the danger to the monarchy contained, not Harry erased. He admitted that he no longer trusted his brother with institutional access, meaning entry to protected royal information and decision-making. But he refused to let their children inherit a permanent war built from their father's anger. Harry lowered his voice. He did not confess to leaking the memorial discussion, but he admitted that private information had repeatedly escaped through people around him. For the first time, he accepted that failing to stop it had caused real harm. William heard the admission without victory. There was no triumph in watching his brother finally understand the damage. Then, Harry made his choice. He told William he would not legally challenge Charles's declaration and would not give a retaliatory interview. He would accept the loss. But before the palace announcement, he wanted their father to hear that decision from him personally. The brothers did not reconcile. They did something quieter and more important. They stopped the conflict from becoming another public explosion. And Harry's unexpected restraint would soon change how the world understood the final break. When the announcement finally reached the public, it did not sound like gossip or another temporary royal disagreement. The language was precise, permanent, and unmistakable. Harry's last official titles had been revoked by command of the king. Across Britain, broadcasters abandoned scheduled coverage. Newspaper editors rebuilt their front pages, and crowds gathered outside royal gates. Yet the image that defined the day was not one of anger. It was Harry's silence and the absence of the counterattack everyone expected. Buckingham Palace released the formal notice shortly after midday. A formal palace notice is an official public statement carrying the authority of the royal household. The wording confirmed that Charles had permanently removed Harry's remaining official designations, while carefully stating that he remained the king's son and a member of the family by birth. The country divided within minutes. Some commentators called the decision necessary constitutional discipline, meaning firm action taken to protect the rules and credibility of the monarchy. Others described it as the final collapse of reconciliation between father and son. Every debate returned to one word: permanent. Morning brought an image that captured the shock. A major British newspaper printed an empty ceremonial chair beneath the headline, "The Last Title Gone." The chair represented the place Harry once held within royal duty, and its emptiness made the loss feel greater than any legal phrase could explain. Outside Buckingham Palace, a small crowd gathered behind television crews. An elderly veteran approached the railings and left a handwritten note reading, "A son is still a son." Reporters repeated the words during live broadcasts. The message cut through the argument because it captured the sadness beneath the constitutional drama. Charles saw the front page inside the palace. He folded it slowly and asked an aide to remove it. Camilla noticed the tears forming before he turned away. The queen consort said nothing. She understood that the king had protected the institution, but the father inside him was still paying the price. Then Harry broke his silence through a written statement released by his office. It contained only 3 sentences. He acknowledged Charles's authority, confirmed that he would not challenge the decision, and declared that his love for his family did not depend on an official title. The restraint changed everything. Broadcasters who had prepared for retaliation began speaking about dignity instead. Commentators who expected another royal war were forced to reconsider the man at its center. Harry had lost his status, but he refused to let anger become his final public identity. The world expected revenge, but he answered with restraint, and that silence forced the monarchy and the public to confront the true meaning of what Charles had done. In the end, Harry did not return to the palace, Charles did not reverse the order, and William did not offer a hidden path back. The titles remained revoked. The records stayed changed. What had once been a painful temporary separation became a permanent constitutional fact. Yet the final meaning of the decision was not simply that the crown had defeated a rebellious prince. It was that 3 men finally stopped pretending family love and royal trust were the same thing. Charles allowed the declaration to take full effect without appeal, amendment, or private exemption. A constitutional fact is a permanent decision that changes how the monarchy officially operates. Harry's remaining royal titles disappeared from active palace use, closing the institutional dispute completely and leaving no hidden route back. Harry returned to California carrying the printed notice. He placed it inside a drawer, rather than displaying it or destroying it. Meghan watched him close it and asked whether he wanted to keep fighting. He told her he would no longer build his life around proving what the monarchy had taken from him. For the first time, he chose an identity that did not depend on palace recognition. Charles sat alone and wrote a personal letter. He began with "Dear Harry," not with any former title. The king did not mention restoration. Instead, he explained that the palace door, meaning the path back to official royal duty, was closed. But the family door did not have to remain locked forever. The monarch understood the cost. Protecting the crown had required an action that could permanently damage his bond with his youngest son. He did not celebrate the outcome, and no private account suggested relief. Yet he no longer questioned the decision, because royal authority could not survive if blood repeatedly overruled trust. William drew his own boundary. The prince accepted that brotherhood could continue only outside official royal power. He would not restore Harry's position when he became king, but he also refused to treat him as an enemy. More importantly, he would not allow their children to inherit the bitterness that had divided their fathers. Harry finally faced the contradiction that had shaped his life for years. He had rejected royal duty while remaining emotionally tied to royal recognition. Now that the titles were gone, he had to decide who he was without the palace approving the answer. He accepted that Charles could not give him that identity. The crown emerged protected but scarred. Charles proved that blood could not override duty. Harry proved that losing status did not require losing dignity. William proved that boundaries could exist without hatred. The titles were gone forever. The royal chapter was closed, and there would be no return to official life but in accepting that final truth. Harry, Charles, and William ended the battle, that had kept all three trapped in the past. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.